Oh, hey, come on in. Let's talk about pocket knives. All right, I believe that we're going to start on this Western next. I love Western knives. That was a good brand name, and they're getting difficult to come by now. We will go ahead and look this knife over closely. We have a lot of dings and divots. Someone used it as a hammer at various times. The handles, I can't tell if that's been patched or not. I also can't tell for sure if that's bone or if that's the Delrin plastic, but as I look close, it looks kind of like bone. But it's starting to separate here and here, so we'll probably pull those handles off and reglue them. I'm going to try, I believe, to, I believe I'm going to try to cut that apart with a razor blade. That might be the easiest way, since I've got a little bit of separation here anyway. Let's see if I can insert that in between the liners. Yeah. I want to do it, obviously, without cutting myself. Okay. So we will drive it through, putting it in the vise. Drive it down this way. I'll do that off camera because you just saw me do it on another knife. And we'll cut these two pins into this one and this one. Then I'll take the blade out, reverse it. We'll cut the pivot pin and have this knife apart, and we'll do a blade delete on it. Okay, so I just used the razor blade, the dead blow hammer, and the vise to take this knife apart, or to cut the pins rather. This is the same blade that I just used on the last knife, the Strayed Walden. So I've got about 5 little divots cut in that blade now. That one now goes in scrap metal. Okay, so for our knife, again, I cut it on the pile side. We've got it separate. Got a little bit of vertigo there. Let's see, I had this open, but I had to close it in order to hammer on the knife. And there's our broken tang. And again, that is the tang with the maker's name on it. I don't see any markings on the other blade, the primary that's whole. But that one is definitely Western, Boulder, Colorado, made in USA. Again, it was a very good knife company. They are now out of business. I think they were bought by Coleman, maybe Camelus. I don't know exactly the paternity of that, but some very good old knife companies. Now again, I'm going to mark the springs because that's what I do. This is the pile side, so 2 marks. So that's the second spring. Also, that shows me which direction the spring is going to be facing. Now, on this knife, that's very easy because I only have blades on one side. But on the knife like the previous one where I had blades on both sides, that really makes it much easier to assemble. You're not having to play puzzle games to get it figured out. Now, I'm prying very gently on my liner. I don't want to bend it. But I'm afraid I'm going to. That does not want to come out. We'll see if we can drive the pins out instead then. There we go. Nope, all we did was peen them. That was definitely not my intention. No. There we go. Knocked it far enough with the center punch. I like to use it because it's a little heavier. It doesn't bend as easily as my smaller punches. You go through, I go through a lot of punches, which is regrettable. But okay, this is my mark side, so it gets 1 score. Here's my blade, and there's the icky handle. Very nasty, but that's normal. You don't have to worry about the person being a slob who owned it. That's just what working knives are like. Again, I'm going to take these handles off. I believe that's bone, and it looks like it's cracked there. And someone re-dyed everything. That's why there's brown on the shield. There's brown on several bits of the metal here. I guess the bone was kind of bleached out looking, and they re-dyed it. This is one I bought off of eBay. And that doesn't bother me at all. We will clean everything up. Where that bone's splintered, we'll take a look at what our options are there. I don't want to get too in-depth with this one. I basically just want to do the blade delete. But we do want to fill in any of those gaps. We might repin the handle, but I'll start being a little more gentle with it. I was sure it was Delrin plastic, which is a bit more durable and flexible. Bone is very easy to crack, so I'm going to start being more gentle with a hammer. All right, got all the pieces cleaned up. I went ahead and cleaned them on a wire wheel because it was very, very grungy. And it was not cleaning off easily by hand. Typically, I clean things like that off by hand. Use Scotch-Brite. It works pretty well on it. The shield is pinned on this one, which is a good thing. That, again, indicates its age. So, yeah, the more I look at it, the more I'm positive those are bone handles. The thing that threw me off was the fact that someone had dyed them. Looks like they used a brown leather dye or shoe dye on it. And it kind of gives everything a homogeneous color look instead of the variations that you see in bone. Bone has some very nice variations and depths of color to it that make it a really nice medium for pocket knives. So what I'm going to do is take the Dremel and drill the heads off those pins. I've got that one for the shield, and I've got one here and one here for the handles themselves, and that should pop right off. And then we'll see about cleaning up the backside of those handles, or yeah, the inside edge of them basically. And the bone, re-gluing that bone back on there, getting it good and flat, as it was a little bit, and I picked up the wrong one. It's, curling away from the liners on the ends. Now, it may be that the bone has chipped away from the liners. That's possible. We can fix that too if that's the case. I just may not be able to finish it today, but we can do that. Well, yes. Don't believe I have cut that one away enough. It's a thicker pin. Requires a little bit more. The good thing about using the small ball burr for that is it leaves a good indentation there for your new pin to sit down into. And so when you pin it, you can get a good grip and hold very well. I'm probably going to regret this, but let's try to, no, it worked. Yes, absolutely, no doubt about it. These are bone handles. I have 2 or 3 pieces that have broken off. We will clean and degrease those. Clean the, put it up here so you can see it. Clean and degrease the bone as well. Then we can glue and pin them back in place just like we did with the plastic handles on the earlier knife that we did. Okay, I've used super glue to put those little pieces of bone back in. I'm going to put some on this side as well, just to fill up those cracks. It'll still show. You'll still be able to see the cracks, but it should be fine. But first, I'm going to go ahead and sand that flat again because couldn't get it perfect, and I want it to sit flat on those liners. Then we'll glue them to the liners, pin them to the liners, and that may be it for today. We'll finish this up another day. Okay, let's see about gluing these handles on. I have sanded the handle on this side. It doesn't seem to be a good fit. I don't know why. It looked well when it came off the knife, but for some reason I have gaps on each side of it, but we may fill that in with some epoxy later. I'll show you that. Okay, so we'll get that covered. Now try to put a very thin layer on the knife itself. There. These adhesives are very good quality. You don't have to use too much. Just a very thin layer. We want to make sure we get it on each end as well. Okay. All right. You can see it wants to slide and skate around, and that's okay because we are about to. I don't know why my camera stopped recording, but it did. So, anyway, like I said, the handle wants to slide around, but that's all right. That's not anything we're going to worry about because the pins will help hold it in place. These are the same Schrade pins that I used on that Schrade Walden knife earlier this morning. You know, if I can get it through there. There we go. And the first pin through. Now this one is right at our broken area. So we'll be very careful pinning this one. Okay. So put it down with the head of that pin firmly against the anvil. Very light taps. The end of our pins are dimpled, and they flare out very easily, hold in place very good. We will sand that well on the inside to make sure it's smooth. There, that's got that. Let me go ahead. I'm going to fill in these cracks with the cyanoacrylate adhesive. Just let that wick down in there. I will sand that very well before we're done. That crack on the against the bolsters bothers me greatly. So I'm going to work a little of this down into it, this glue. Now I know we just have gobs of glue around here now. That's right, we'll sand things off, finish it up, fill in those cracks. And if we need to, I'll also fill that in with epoxy later. Now the handle is separated just a little bit, so I'm going to put one clamp on it back at this end. There we go. Have a spring clamp on that one. Now, we'll glue and pin this one very quickly. I like to use the index cards to protect my work surface as much as possible. There you go. Thin bit of glue, that most of it back off. Very thin coating. I used to use epoxies for this, but I don't know of any way to do it without getting it all over my hands. And epoxies smell very bad. I don't think they're that good for your health. So this glue cleans off much more easily. Doesn't have the bad smell that epoxy has. Let's see if I can drive the pin in there now. There we go. Clean those holes out just a little bit. All right. Firmly against the anvil. Very light taps. Bone is a brittle substance that cracks very easily in thin sheets, and old bone cracks especially easily. That's one reason I love those pre-made pins. There it goes, a little tighter on each end. I still have a gap right there, again just due to the crack in the bone. I'm going to fill in with a little bit more glue there. There we go. And we'll clamp that. And there we are. In just a few hours, the glue should be dry enough. I could probably put the knife together now, but that's about all the time I have today. So I'm going to come back and finish it another day. All right, so it's another day. We're coming back to see if we can finish up this Western Hunter with our blade delete. So we'll take off our clamps and let's see how things look. Okay, I believe this side looks very good. Of course, we still have the dye that's on it. My glue overran, which I expected. That's not a problem. This one, the glue kind of filled up those cracks. I think once we clean it off, it'll look good. If not, we've got another trick for that, and I'll go ahead and describe it real quick. Whether or not we do it on this knife, we may do it on one in the future. You can sprinkle, since this is brown, you can sprinkle some instant coffee in there if it's finely ground instant coffee, and then put a few drops of super glue or some type of fast setting glue. It doesn't have to be a brand name, but put that in there and it will adhere to it. Or you can mix the instant coffee in with clear epoxy and fill up those cracks with it, and that'll help. So what we're going to do is we're going to clean these up a little bit. Here where our pins, where we peened it, we want to get that nice and flat, and we'll go from there. After sanding the pins on the inside of the liners where we peened them, you want to make sure that's very flat, or else the blade will catch on the bumps of those pins. So once we've sanded that flat, I'm going to sand the glue off where it's squeezed out around the edges of the knife. Still have some shiny spots where the glue is in the knife. That will even out when we polish the knife. Right now I just wanted to rough it up enough. Now we're going to rough up this section here where the shield goes. I'll use a Dremel tool for that. Was not looking to deepen that any. I just wanted to rough it up so that the adhesives would stick. So. Now our shield was pinned. So we have a little pin here. Ooh, I need to clean up that shield before we go any further as well. We'll leave the pin on there, but it's not going to go all the way through the liner now because we ground that end off. What we'll do is we'll put some glue on it, glue it in place. The glue and the pin, even though the pin is not pinned, will give it a lot more surface area for the glue to stick. The shield won't shift or move. It works very good. Again, with the shield, we're doing about the same thing we did with the knife itself or with the handle itself. We just want to rough it up enough and clean it up enough, get all the gunk off of there, that the glues will stick. See, even that single drop is going to be a bit too much glue, but that's okay. We'll clean up the excess as it squeezes out. All right, they pushed my pin through, so let's pin that back down gently. There we go. I actually wish I had inlet the opening for the shield a little bit more. The shield is standing proud, which was normal with a lot of old shields. They were not inlet very deeply. I like to have them a little more smoothed with the surface. You know, my pen did come through slightly. Let me go ahead and pin it. That will do nothing more than help hold it, even though I don't believe it's enough to make a big difference. All right, and before we get too far into this and I forget about it, I want to go ahead and put my initials and the date on the pile side inside liner. All right. We next need to get some correct size pins. Wow, that appears to be close, just right out of the box. Let's see. .094 inches, and my original pin. This was the center pin. 1096. Yeah, that's it. Let's see if I want to use brass. Do I even have that size in brass? That is a great question. 0.095, yes. All right, so we will not have to turn those pins down. That is a very rare thing. Okay, let me sharpen the end of this. That'll make it much easier for the pins to slide in. All right, so we've sharpened the ends of the pins. Let's begin our assembly. Just going to slide that all the way through to preserve that point for the next one. I'm going to go ahead and pin this one just a little bit to hold it in place. We're not going to try to finish it yet. I just don't want the pin falling out while I'm working on the next pin. There we go. See, it's just enough that it won't push through. This pin is still too long. I'll shorten it down and pin it further before I'm through. There we go. All right, that should keep my pin from falling out while I'm working on the other pins. All right, 1 scrap mark, 2 scrap marks. This was the spring for this blade because this was the second blade. Flatten the end where I cut it. Okay. And the same thing I did before. I'm going to pin it just a little bit to keep that from falling out while we're working. There we go. That should be enough. It's something where my pin will not slide out. Just as we've done before with other knives, remove the rubber protector for so the metal jaw will be against the spring. This one still has the rubber protector. There are other clamps and things to make this a little bit easier yet, but I need to build one. And I'm wanting to show you how to do this with just basic tools. We can all add tools as we go. Now, to make the pin go in a little bit easier, I'm going to put 1 drop of oil right there. You know, look down through the hole and see when I believe those are lined up as good as I can get them. There we go. When you can push it in by hand, you know you had everything lined up perfectly. Now we have enough pressure that I can't push it in by hand. So we'll test our snap. Alrighty, snap is good. Okay, some of you may have caught what I did. I did not until I had this thing put together, but my back spring was not fitting correctly. I was, in my mind, thinking this was the primary blade. This was actually the secondary. So I had the wrong spring in there. There is a difference in the thickness between these two springs. This one is thinner this way, so it just wasn't fitting correctly. So put this spring in there. Now we will reinsert my spring pin and see how that fits. I say spring pin, the center pin. It's not lining up correctly. Let's try it again. I'm watching the hole. It's looking straight down. I know you can't see it on the video. There. Again, I'll put a drop of oil on the knife, be a little on the pin. And just with some very gentle taps, we have that in place. Had a little bit of metal there that got caught on the rubber protector. That's all right. Okay, so I'm just going to smooth these pins, peen them. Some of them I'll have to cut off the correct length. And we should be finished with this knife in just a bit. I still have a bad habit of leaving too much pin material sticking up. And if you try to pin too much, you will crack the bone. In fact, I've got a small chip right here that was not there before. It came when I drove this pin through. I thought I was being careful, but bone is very, very fragile, and especially when it's old. So, yep, I have added an additional bit of problems to this knife. I mean, it's not going to give a problem. It's just going to be less perfect than it was before, but it is never going to be a museum piece anyway. I do want it to be as nice as it can be. Okay. Need to peen it very much. Okay, there, it's still protruding a little bit. I will sand that down and file that down when we get finished. Again, we don't have to swell it out very far, just enough that the pin cannot move out either direction. Okay, now we'll pin our other pins. Blade's a little off-centered, but we haven't peened it yet, so that's sometimes normal. Back spring's still sunken in slightly, but it's just going to have to be. Okay, just wanted to do a test fit before we went too far here. This pin on the back, we can peen it with a little more force. Again, we don't have to overdo it, but it can clamp down fairly tightly. Our center pin, we don't want it to be too tight just because we might crack the bone. And of course the pivot pin, if it's too tight, your blade won't move. We have to have the tension very exact on it. Okay. All right. We'll begin peening these. I'll just get one side first. Okay, the first side I will try to over peen just a little bit. Because it will help it to fill that space. There won't be a line around it any more than we can help. This one I want to peen very carefully now. Okay, I'll stop. I have no side-to-side movement. The blade is moving pretty good. I'm still off-center, just leaning too far that direction. I might have to crank the blade, which I don't really want to do, but we may have to. Okay, so the blade at 90 degrees. I'll tell you what, I'll set the bolster up here on the on my angle iron, which is up raised above from the bed just a little bit, and very gentle light taps. I'm not wanting to bend the blade so much as bend that pin just a little, just slightly, or even the frame of the knife more than the blade. It's a little bit off-centered, but it's not catching on the liner now. See if I can go just a little bit farther with it. Yeah, not as good as I wish it was. Still not centered, but I'm afraid to go any further with it. I just don't want to destroy that blade. A knife with no blades is no good at all. One with one blade is still useful. All right, my friends, I am very pleased with how this knife turned out. It does have some flaws. Of course, the first being there is no tang stamp. This blade did not have a tang stamp. The broken blade is the only one that did. It is a Western States, and you can tell that from the look. It does have a slightly different look from some of your other hunters, but still I regret that we don't have a tang stamp on it. But I believe it did turn out pretty good. I have a few flaws that I introduced to the knife. Of course, there's a small divot right here from the sanding belt. As well, there's a small one here on the rear bolster. Just mistakes that I made, got into the edge of the belt and left a groove on each of those. We do also have the small chip in the pivot right there, the pivot side bone. It didn't break completely out. There's just a small chip missing. But that is a flaw, and it's one I introduced. That was not there before. But our patch, where the bone had been broken in several places, we glued that back. It looks good. It feels good. You can tell it's been patched, but we're not going to lie about it. It has been patched. The knife is a repaired knife, but it works good. It can be put into service now and actually used, which is what I think old knives should be used, unless it's a museum piece or a collector's piece. It should go in the pocket. That's what it was designed for. And this is one someone can carry. They don't have to fear of losing an expensive knife, but they can certainly use a good one.